Hi, my name is Olga. I work as a lead UX designer at Wargaming on a project, World of Tanks Blitz. And today I'm going to share very practical approach to designing user experience. I'm going to show you what kind of mistakes we made, how we fixed them, how we used user experience classical tools to fix those problems. And, oh, this is my first slide. So yeah, this is me. And before I go on to the presentation itself, I just wanted to touch upon a little thing which I call game user experience, because very often when I go to conferences, I talk to game designers, regular designers, UI designers, and I want to ask them, what do you think game user experience is? Mostly they imagine this: true action, people engaging in action and shooting stuff or just running around, discovering stuff. Nobody thinks about user experience when your player, per se, downloaded a game and he cannot launch it. Maybe he spent a lot of money purchasing your game, or maybe he spent 3 days trying to download 50 GB of your build. He cannot install it. He already hates your game, and this is bad user experience. It's already game user experience. Or maybe your build on iOS requires a lot of free space, and for some reason, you're forcing people to delete their, per se, vacation photos to install your game. So they won't do that, and simply you won't get your player. Or maybe you've developed a very weird icon and screenshots on iTunes that cannot simply tell people what your game is about, like this game, Tooth Fairy. What does it do? There is no clear indication in the description what the game is about. Why is it even a game? I simply don't understand. Or maybe the controls in your game are so clunky that a player cannot find settings. Like, it took me a really long time to find settings on this screen because it's so overwhelming. There are too many colors, and the whole design is just pushing me away. I don't want to play this game because it's too much. So today I'm gonna share with you how we learned what is true game user experience, how you build it, how you make it coherent, and who your player are, understanding who your player are, what he likes, what he prefers to do on this device and on your game. And also I'll share how to use classical user experience tools in mobile game design. And of course, I'm going to tell you about all the mistakes we've made and how we fixed them. So when we started designing our game, we had a vague idea about who our player is. We had all the analytics. We had a portrait. We've started building personas. So we thought we knew who our player is, but when we started designing the game, we realized that we do not understand the expectations of our players. So what we did is we've started, this is not actually our game designers, but it's just a picture from the internet. But basically we've started generating ideas, putting them together in the pot, doing some quick prototyping and testing straight on users. And this is one of the very first prototypes. This was a very simplistic one where we just spread around random controls, no UI design whatsoever. All we wanted to see, is our approach correct? Would people expect a tank game to be in a landscape position on an iOS device? Would they expect the controls to be where we thought they wanted to see them? Would it be comfortable to hold the device this way? And we also wanted to try different types of joysticks and controls to see whether it reflects the correct micro management of the vehicle. We also tried, this is the different types of controls. Well, we tried to use gyroscope. Don't do that. If you're doing a micro managing of the vehicle, it totally kills the buzz because people are getting very frustrated when they're trying to drive the tank, and it drives either too fast or too slow, and the response is not that good. So don't do that. We also tried a very fun flower button. UX-wise, this is a perfect button because it saves you up a lot of space. Usually it's very clear for people in theory how to use it. When we tested it, it was horrible. People didn't know what to do with it. And men who are our target audience have huge hands. We never thought that people have such huge hands. And if you would imagine this to be on iPhone 4, their finger covers like half of the screen. They don't see all these controls. And we also had one guy who didn't know how to interact with this control. So he thought, okay, he took off his shoes and tried to maneuver the tank with his feet. So don't think that you know everything about your players, because we sure didn't know anything about our players. And at that point, after having collected all this data, we knew one thing. Landscape positioning of the device is the perfect positioning for maneuvering the tank. Most users use their both hands and thumbs to maneuver and shoot, and this was a crucial point because at that point we knew how to start designing our interface. Everything should be around the screen, and the middle should be where action is going on and where action is happening. So we knew that, and we moved on to designing interface itself, the lobby. This is my favorite one. This is the very first prototype, paper prototype I did. Would you imagine a tank prototype to be in pink post notes? It was horrible. Again, we tested it on players. It was not scalable. You would not be able to scale up this interface. And per se, if you wanted to add up a little bit more of functionality, it would be impossible. Also, the navigation and the icons were unreadable. So we moved on to this vicious circle of prototyping, testing our prototypes, correcting all the mistakes that we found out during testing, moving on to prototyping again. And while I want to show you one of the examples of a prototype, I'll show you the full screen later on. We did a paper prototyping on very experienced mobile players. We showed them the UI, the lobby, and we thought that this solution was perfect. Transparent interface, very concise icons, very easy to decipher. It turned out that we were so wrong. For example, experienced mobile players do not understand what lays underneath this yellow cup, golden cup. We thought it was clear it was achievements. Apparently, a lot of people thought it was leaderboards. And they're correct, because this is what the industry has set up for us, and we have to play by the rules. Or like the cross swords, it was impossible for people to understand what it means. We thought it was obvious that it was battle results. So at that point, we realized no matter what kind of icons we use, if we want to develop a game that is played worldwide, we have to use text. And I know that all designers say that the best icon is text. We learned it the hard way. So after that, after having tested one of this very solid and very high definition prototypes, again, we realized that there is not much space for growing the functionalities later on. So we wanted to use a very classical UX tool, building the information architecture. Our starting device was iPhone 4, so it was very small, but our game designers wanted us to put in tank tree, player profile, news, notifications, all this stuff that would not simply fit in iPhone 4. We stopped at that point and said, stop producing documentation, because game designers love making up stuff. And if you're trying to fit it into an interface, it starts to seem impossible. So we wanted to start fresh. Get rid of all this clunky information and start thinking and going back to all those testing videos, go through all those testing results and try to understand what's important for the player. The player does not care about all this jazz that all the game designers came up with. If it's a tank game, they want to see the tank list, right? They want to upgrade their tank before they go into the battle. They want to prepare the tank and add up some equipment, consumables, and ammunition. They want to train the crew so the crew maneuvers the tank a lot better. They want to buy stuff. Of course they want to buy stuff before they go into battle. They want to communicate with other players. Well, this one was for us. We want to monetize, right? And they want to go into battle. The rest is just jazz. All this stuff is less relevant for the person who came into your game to play a tank game. In-app purchases, he doesn't want to see that on the very first screen because then you're pushing your monetization and then he will leave. So it turned out to be a really good decision, and this is how it's reflected in our current interface. So if you can see, the less relevant stuff is hidden in the sidebar, and the main stuff is positioned on the main screen. So this is our current hangar. And if you want to see what information architecture looks like and how it can help you to reposition your interface parts, this is just a simple example. It's not true to life, and it's very small. In real life, it's huge. It's impossible to see it in one screen. But this is just to give you an idea what you can play, how you can play with it. We have the first level interfaces, like Garage and HUD, right? These are two main crucial points for the player. He wants to go to Garage to choose a tank from a tank tree, to upgrade it, and then go into a true action, right? Then we have the actual button of going into battle and a store. We consider a store to be second relevant to the player because this is what we want people to do. We want them to go either to go into battle or to buy stuff. So for our interface, store and battle are of the second relevance. The gray blocks are of the third priority to the player, and the white ones are even less relevant. So if you want to evaluate your interface, you can see that in battle results, it's too clunky. Or if you want to see how far your awards are from your player, you can see they're very far away. They're extremely far away. So if you're considering it to be the most important, one of the most important parts of your interface, you have to move it up, right? Or if you want to expand your functionality, you want to see that there is some free space that you can use up. And there are some screens that don't have free space at all. So it's impossible to fit in new functionality. So either you have to reorganize stuff, or you separate it and make it two separate screens or two separate functionalities. So it's very useful to use information architecture. We always try not to forget basic cognitive psychology principles. We like to direct players' attention. We know how we want our players' attention to move across the screen. So we use animation to drive people's attention to the focal object, to the tank. Because this is the main thing in our interface that is sexy, that we want people to pay attention to because they're different. The models are amazing. So after a certain period of time of spending, that people spend in a hangar, we start moving the tank around, just a little bit. So it just instantly drags your attention to this focal object, right? We also use color triggers to direct people's attention. As I showed you on the previous screens in information architecture, the main goal for us is players going into battle. We don't want them to hang around in the hangar too much. We want them to launch the game and play that battle button. So the battle button is orange, bright orange. And we did a lot of research on the button coloring. We wanted to make it red initially, and it turned out a lot of people from different countries, especially from North America, are very scared of pressing the red button. Apparently they have this association that it might launch a nuclear rocket or something. They're not eager to press it at all. They're scared. They think it's something like, quit the game or delete everything on my iPhone. So red was not the way to go. So the next color that it could be associated with armored warfare or with shooting and action would be bright orange, because it is the color of fire. And we've tested it, and it turned out to be great. People are very eager to press this button, not only because it's bright orange, but also this is the only bright button on the whole screen. There's nothing that drags your attention more than this huge battle button, and you want to press it. Also, it looks like candy. A lot of players say that it looks like candy, and it kind of is very tempting to press it. The second triggering color is green, and we had a lot of trouble with playing with coloring and trying to make it second color compared to the orange. And we've tried several tones, and this one turned out to be the best, this muted down green, because this is how players' attention works. First, he pays attention to the bright orange button. Then he sees the tank moving around, and then he just wants to stop for a minute and just look around, and then he notices the green button. This is how his attention moves around. And this is how we want his attention to move around. This is why we've deliberately chosen those colors and the positioning and the order of those buttons. This is the full prototype that I've shown you before. And I want to just briefly guide you through the wrong colors that we had over here, right? So we had the red button at the right down corner. Is it right? Yeah. People hated pressing this button. It had no labeling, so they had no idea what it means. A lot of people thought that it means quit the game or quit the hangar and move somewhere on a higher level of the hierarchy. The green coloring was all over, and it distracted people's attention. They had no idea where to look at, and they could not tell what anything means in this interface. And it was a disaster. And if you look at this coloring and the composition, what could be worse than blue and red? These are two very, very bright colors, and blue is a more priority color to red. So at this point, people are not looking at the play button, at the battle button. They're not looking at the shop button. All they see is this blue, which totally distracts them from the thing that he wants to do. So this was a really bad choice. Going back to cognitive psychology principles, everybody knows about magical number 7. Everybody? Everybody knows? No? 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 Okay, I'll briefly explain it. So basically, this is working with people's memory. People can only hold up to 7 or 5 to 9 objects in their mind. And if you're overwhelming them with a lot more than 7, approximately 7, depends on the educational level of people. Let's say 7. And if you're overloading your screen and you have like 27 different items on the screen flying around, people will simply close it because it's too much, because their brain is overloading. They are unable to process all the information that you're giving them. So if your tutorial has more than 7 steps, forget it, they will never remember it. If your interface has more than 7 major parts, forget it. People will not remember how to use it. Maybe after launching it 20 times, maybe they'll remember it. So try to work with human abilities. If it's impossible for them to remember more than 7 things at one time, don't give them more than 7 things. Every book on user experience tells you you have to go native to the platform. It's crucial to use the native experience of the platform and incorporate it in your interface. That's what we thought. So we came up with this amazing control. We stole it from GarageBand. We borrowed it, I'll say, we borrowed it. It's not the exact same control, but we took the principles of the control because it was amazing. Basically what it does, it allows players to input the number in 3 ways. The first one is simple one is tap, and it's a manual input. The keyboard pops up and you can input whatever number you want. Second one is micromanage by using the arrows up and down. And the third one, the most difficult one, is macro management. When you tap, hold, and scroll up or down, it macro manages the number. It was perfect. We wanted to give people all those multiple ways of input of information. It was amazing. When I first saw people using this control on tests, I was horrified. When you tell people, could you please input 2,000 of experience? You know what people started doing? Tapping it one by one. You could see the frustration on their face because they were trying to reach 2,000 and they can see going 1, 2, 3, 4. What happens next is their finger, because it's huge, accidentally slides to the tap zone and they see the keyboard pop up. And they're like, oh, that's easy. I can input it manually. I've never seen people realize that you can use tab, hold, and scroll up and down. Never, ever during tests. Nobody could decipher that you could do this with this control. So before you think of borrowing native controls, always do testing because it might not be the very best solution for you. When players start playing your game or launch your game or just simply look at the icon, they always do this unconscious calculation in their head. They calculate the practical value of the product. Basically, they expect something. They've seen some screenshots. Maybe they've seen a commercial somewhere. Maybe they read somewhere about your game. So they have this expected value. And they try to realize how much interaction cost they have to put into this app or your game. How much reading are you gonna give to them? If your tutorial is pages of text, he's gonna say, no, it's too much. This game requires too much attention and too much interaction cost from me. So, when a player launches your game and he sees a create account screen with CAPTCHA, have you ever seen CAPTCHA on mobile? Well, this is the requirement that we had because we're making an online game and we have to keep track of the progress of people. It's all very complicated, and this is what actually game designers gave us. This is how game designers see the login scheme into the game. And I said, if you would ever see someone go to the very ending point of this login, it would be a success. Seriously, it's impossible. So we had to go by the requirements, and we put in this create Wargaming.net ID, and it turned out to be a huge failure. So we've lost a lot of players at this screen because they didn't see the candy. They saw the login screen. You're asking them to give them their email address. You're not giving them the candy up front. So now we do everything in the background. So all the player has to do is touch the screen and go straight into action. He sees the candy up front, and only later on, when we've showed him everything we have on the game, we kindly ask him, now, would you mind giving us your email, please? And trust me, they're very eager to. Very often when business people want to increase numbers, they always want to increase numbers, no matter what kind of numbers you have. They usually go to game designers or maybe analytics. They never come to UX people. And I'm going to show you how using user experience techniques, you can improve numbers. So this is one of the major monetization items in our game, which is premium account. And of course, we want to sell it more. But we don't want to be too pushy, because if you start being too pushy, you push people away. What we came up with is this little orange tag there at the top. It's not that the orange tag or the color is or the position is, it's the timing that is crucial at this point. We don't show it to everyone. We don't show it at every time. We use a specific timing. If you notice that this person has overachieved in a game, he showed an outstanding result. He earned a lot of credit. He got a huge and very important medal. He got a master. It's not a very usual situation. It's very rare that people outperform that way. So what we tell him, for some reason he doesn't have a premium account. So what we tell him is, great job. We're so happy for you. We've never seen you do this way. We've never shown you this thing. And for you being so awesome, we give you a bonus. We give you a bonus. We appreciate you being so awesome. And the bonus is that we give you a discounted premium account. And because of this timing, and because the person is so happy with himself, he's extremely happy. He just killed 7 tanks. He brutally destroyed him. He earned a lot of money. And then we tell him, we're happy for you. So we give you a bonus. And because we're not presenting it as a purchase, but we're presenting it at the very correct time, and we present it as a bonus, people are a lot more eager to make a purchase. So that's how you can increase conversions. Now I'm going to go very briefly about just major lessons that we've learned and some things I would like you to avoid when you're designing your game. Do not put too many screens in between action, reward, and new content. When you're putting too many screens, people get distracted, and if they get distracted, their session is ended. So if you want to prolong the action of the session, don't put too many screens. Put one. If people want to get distracted, they will. If they don't, give them such an option to stay in this very tight game loop. Work on your tutorial. We've spent so much time designing and then redesigning our tutorial. And we've learned the hard way that your tutorial should not be a tutorial. Your tutorial should be a game. And the more it looks like a game, the more action you show them, the better it is perceived when it's not perceived as a tutorial. Especially if you have such a complex game as we have, because our mechanics are huge and very complex. So we're trying to separate them, make them smaller, give it one at a time. We never visually show that we're only providing value for paying players. Most of our content is free, and that's why our players are so loyal, because there is no misbalance between paying and non-paying people. It's just paying people are playing a lot faster than non-paying people, but it's possible. So we're not saying that, okay, everything is premium. We have 3 tanks that are free for you, but if you want to get the rest, they're awesome, just pay. No, this is not about our game. By providing free content, we're building a huge audience that is more eager to pay because we don't ask them to pay. Sounds a little bit silly, right? We're also very happy for our players. We try to make a big deal out of their achievements. And we use sound effects, we use visual effects, animation, everything we can to show people that we appreciate their progress. If you don't appreciate their progress, they do not want to develop in your game. If you appreciate it, they will be very happy to see that you're happy for them. We also know that, we've learned it, that mobile players are very hungry for fresh content. They don't like getting stuck in the same scene over and over again. So now we deliver fresh content every patch, which is every month, which is a lot of work. But we deliver fresh tanks, fresh maps every page. We know that user experience starts not from the action in your game. It starts from an icon. It starts from your iTunes page. People do read descriptions. People look through screenshots. They evaluate your game through the icon and through those pictures that you have on your iTunes. So do A/B testing. There are lots of companies that do this nowadays. Even though you think it might be worthless, it is worth, because for me, this is the worst icon ever. As a designer, I hate it. But this is how people perceive our game. They think that this is a very appropriate icon for a tank game. That's why we chose it. We're not making it for us, we're making it for our players. Always think beforehand that you might be translated into lots of languages. When you're designing a game, it's a very crucial point. We never thought that we would be translated into 18 languages. So, design-wise, a very nice screen. Could look horrible in Arabic languages. And now we have to fix all the interface in Arabic languages because it looks just horrid. Just because the whole layout is not designed for those languages. So think before you start doing that. Pay attention to guidelines. This is basically what I was talking about. Give the candy up front. This is one of the principal iOS guidelines. Don't put walls in front of people, give content straight away. It's very obvious. I read guidelines billions of times, and I learned the hard way that you have to trust them. Those people know something, so it's always good to pay attention to guidelines. And always remember about the hardware complications that you might have, or hardware peculiarities. For example, when we were designing our interface, iOS came up with Control Center. We thought of using slide motion to hide stuff on the sides, like parts of menu. Then we saw the presentation, and we completely changed the whole UI just because this simply would interfere with the system. Or we were designing initially for iOS, and we forgot that on Android they have a hard back button, and this caused a lot of issues and a lot of rework to be done. So always remember that there are some hardware peculiarities you have to count in. So overall, basically, remember about cognitive psychology. Remember about classical UX tools. Just because they seem like they fit only on web, try to use them in designing your game. Always test everything on real players. Don't test it on yourself, because you are very biased. Be happy with your players. Congratulate them. Use their emotions to promote your in-game purchases. Always pay attention to guidelines. They never lie. They know some stuff. They've done their testing. There are people with huge brains sitting over there. So use their brains to make your game a lot better. And yeah, this is probably it. Thank you very much. Now, if you have some questions. Thank you. Any questions? There's a question over there.
Hi, thanks for the insights. How do you deal with fragmentation, especially when it comes to your UI being designed for an iPhone 4? How do you scale that to pad resolutions? How do you cope with different legacy Android devices and stuff like that? Or just translations breaking your buttons?
Okay, that's a good question. So dealing with localizations, there is a very good advice. I read it somewhere in a UX article. Basically, it's always good to leave 40% of free space. This is basically saves you from major issues with localizations. Of course, there are some very difficult languages like Finnish. I don't know why. Everybody says that Finnish is very difficult. So, because it's huge, it's very long. So you have to deal with it. And of course, we have a localization team, and we give them restrictions. So, of course, we give them 40% of free space. We say it cannot be longer than, I don't know, 17 letters. Please come up with something shorter. And it's always possible because it's language. Dealing with scaling. We do not support several lower Android devices just because we do not. People can run or build on it. It's possible. But it looks horrible, and everything looks horrible. But when they address this issue in the customer support, we say that if you were to download it from the official store, you would see that we give you restrictions. It's impossible to run it perfectly on your device because it's too old or too small. So we have our starting points. Also, when we design regarding iOS, we have a smart scaling system, but when UX people design UX, we design it for the smallest possible device and for the biggest possible device. This way, when we're scaling everything, usually it scales perfectly because we use our own scaling system. We do not use iOS scaling systems, so it scales almost perfectly. We just make some minor fixes, and that's it. But when you design it, you have to design it either separately and make complete two different builds for iPad or for iPhone, or just do the UX, scale it, and just fit it manually. Any more questions? Here at the front, their front row.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Can you give us some insight about how you conduct the user testing?
The user testing. Well, we have a user experience lab, but it depends what kind of user testing we need for this particular purpose. So if we need to see how the feature works worldwide, we use either our own sources or we find contractors that can do that for us, which is sometimes useful, but if you, just a word of advice, if you do want to do testing in China, try to do it yourself as much as possible, because it's very difficult to do testing with subcontractors over there. But yeah, this is not what I do, because I'm a designer, but I just request something that we need to test this. But basically what we do now is every feature that we develop, we test it before we launch it. So nothing goes out without being tested. So.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. If we have a UI designer, UX designer, and a game designer, would you think that they are on the same level in terms of all of them work on the task at the same time, or would it be one of those people finishing their tasks first and then they are being approved by the person coming afterwards? How would you manage a team of those three people?
That's a great question. It's a very difficult one. I think it depends on the team. But I would say that UX designer is equal to game designer. Game designers don't like me saying that. But if it doesn't work that way, you're doing something wrong. Because if your UX designer does not know squat about game design, you're screwed. If your game designer does not know squat about UX, you're screwed as well. If they both don't know anything about UI, maybe UX designer is not that good, but if game designer knows nothing about UI, it's fine because you have a UI designer. UI designer has to make everything real, like more down to earth, and make it visual. But UX designer can also make it visual, but he also works with game designer because very often when game designers create those game patterns, they're just incorrect because they're either too long or they're too patchy and incoherent. And this is when UX designer has to step in and say that your game design is breaking humans' mind. It's too long. When your tutorial on mobile is 35 minutes, come on, it makes no sense. So they have to work as a team and then pass on the result of their work to the UI designer. And then they have to give feedback as well, because UX designers again, know a lot more of psychology, have to know more about the psychology behind the coloring, behind the shapes, behind the positioning. So if you want to have a great team, have a great game designer, have a great UX designer, UI designer can be mediocre. Sorry. You don't have to hire a very well-paid UI designer if you have a very well-paid game designer and UX designer. So that's what I'm trying to say. UI designers hate me. Yes.
No, we don't. Thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask you about the, if you know, of course, about the art direction of the UI, all the UI elements. Who is responsible for maintaining the vision, coherent vision of the game in terms of UI elements?
Well, in terms of UI, this definitely should be a UI artist. UI artist is responsible for the visual part. UX designer is responsible for scaling up stuff or saying to UI designer, why are you putting pop-up windows with closing windows type buttons on iOS? It makes no sense. So UX designer has to check for the pattern. UI designer has to establish the whole visual style. Unfortunately, this is the balance that every team has to find. And I think that it depends on the personnel that you hire. So if you have a very strong person doing the UI and not a very strong person doing the UX, very often it happens that UI designers make everything pretty, but it's not usable. Same works other way around. If UX designer is a lot stronger than UI designer, it could work, but it would be ugly just because it should be a balance. But if you have a strong UX designer who understands that, then you're fine. If you have a strong art director who, again, is understanding, then you're fine. It never happened in my entire career, because very often UI designers are as game designers with crowns. I'm sorry, I love game designers and UI designers, they don't love me. But you have to manage it really well. It's very difficult, and I think there's no unified answer, but it has to be in balance, because if one overweights the other one, it makes everything screwed up. So yeah.
I was just wondering, I love playing games on PC, shooting games, and I can't really play them well on PlayStation because I don't know, cognitive-wise, I can't manage those many controllers. I have a similar problem on the iPhone when I play with the kind of a joystick. Right now, World of Tanks has a similar system. Do you think that this system is already like the pinnacle of UX design, or do you think that there's a chance that in a year or two those kind of games like first-person shooters right now coming to mobile, or those premium games like World of Tanks coming to mobile will have an even better control mechanism than the current joysticks?
It's a very interesting and very good question. I do believe that it's impossible to make PC players play joystick because they hate it, or console players hate playing on PC. So you would have people who would switch from console to mobile using joysticks, but they're not doing it really well. Have you seen joysticks for iOS or Android? They're very clunky, they're very uncomfortable to hold in your hands, and it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. So maybe, who knows, but I don't think that a huge amount of people will switch to that, just because mobile players are still very casual. It's gonna take a couple of years for them to grow and become a lot closer to mid-core. Because again, if you want to make a mid-core, hardcore game on a mobile, your audience would be like 12 people in the world, and this is not what you want to do. So if I were to design a game, I would never think of going into joystick section and think that this is the future, because most of the people would not spend $1,000 on an iPhone and also $300 on a joystick to it. Not many people would do that. So if you want to sell your game more to a wider audience, yeah, I would not go that direction. Any more questions? Yeah, there's one. From a UI designer. Oh, perfect. You're one of the 12. Amazing.
It's only $50.
Oh, it's only $50. I would not spend, I'm sorry. I would not, I get them for free at work, but I don't use them just because they're not as comfortable. And you have to charge them. This is what kills me. You have to charge them separately from your phone. It's like watch. You have to charge your watch, you have to charge your joystick, you have to charge your phone. How many chargers are you going to have? Like 30? When you travel, what do? It's like, don't take anything with you? No more questions? So if you have any more questions, I will be available over here. You can come up to me, whatever. If you need some advice on your game, I'll do that, happily do that later on. Thank you very much.